Could Pat McAfee be the next big Hollywood superstar? Could he be the next Sylvester Stallone? And what would that mean for West Virginia? That's what we're talking about in today's episode. We're also going to talk about a recent article, a couple articles actually, written about Neal Brown and a recent interview he did with Dave Campbell's Texas Football and why I think there may be some overreacting going on to his comments. We're going to talk about that as well in this episode of Couz's Corner, so stick around and let's have those conversations right now. What is up, and welcome into this episode of Couz's Corner, your home for top shelf college sports talk surrounding the West Virginia Mountaineers and the Big 12. I'm ready to go. I have my Creed shirt on, and I'm ready to take you higher with top shelf content. See what I did there? All right, let's get on with the show. Yes, you heard it right. Pat McAfee to Hollywood. Now, we had already heard rumblings that he was going to appear in a movie. The movie is called the Mosquito Bowl. And, we didn't really know any details beyond that. What were his future plans? Was it just a one-time thing? Well, apparently it's not just a one-time thing. I recently did an article on this over at our website, WV Sports Chat. And it's really brief, and I'm going to read it to you real quick. It says, former WVU football kicker and ESPN personality Pat McAfee will reportedly be kicking his career into high gear, pun intended. In a recent story in Bloomberg, it was reported that the former NFL punter and popular sports personality has hired Ari Emanuel to be his agent. Emanuel was the co-founder of popular talent agency Endeavor. He also owns TKO Group, for whom McAfee has worked as a commentator and in-ring talent for their wrestling business, the WWE. According to the report, Emanuel wants to make McAfee the next Sylvester Stallone. Yo, Adrian. That's the first thing I think of when I hear that. Yo, Adrian. Ironically, McAfee will appear alongside Stallone for a 4-episode run in the next season of Tulsa King. The popular series was created by Taylor Sheridan and features Stallone as a mafia capo from New York who was forced to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma. McAfee is also set to appear in the upcoming film The Mosquito Bowl, which is a sports film. But first off, little side nugget, I love the Tulsa King. I've watched every season of it. It's one of my favorite shows. It's on Paramount Plus. I cannot wait to see McAfee in that show. It's going to be super. I get to watch one of my favorite actors of all time in Sylvester Stallone. I get to watch one of my favorite shows of all time, Tulsa King, and see one of the greatest personalities in sports and a West Virginia alum and West Virginia donor and West Virginia supporter and advocate, Pat McAfee. That's going to be very cool. And I think this is really cool. If McAfee's able to make this a thing, if he's, I look at somebody like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who went from professional wrestler to movie star and is now one of the biggest movie stars in Hollywood. I'm not sure if McAfee will ever reach that level, but man, if he does, how good would that be for West Virginia? McAfee's already a big name. If he gets even bigger by becoming a Hollywood star, to have somebody like that in West Virginia's corner, to have somebody like that on the air at ESPN, by the way, who might have a say in the next round of realignment, I think that's huge for West Virginia. It's huge for Rich Rodriguez. It's because, he and McAfee are, have a great relationship. And to have somebody like Pat McAfee in West Virginia's corner would be massive. And let's face it, he could make even more money than he's already making. He's already a multimillionaire. He could become an even bigger multimillionaire. It's more money he might be able to give for NIL and whatnot. And, and I'm sure that's not his first priority here, right? He's trying to better himself and challenge himself, do just one more thing to check off his bucket list. He's been a WWE commentator. He's been a professional wrestler. He's got his own YouTube show. He's on ESPN. He's on College Game Day. He's now put out a song on Spotify. And almost everything Pat McAfee touches, he's good at it. He's a great commentator. He was actually pretty darn good in the ring. I don't know if for those of you who are wrestling fans, you may remember that. Almost everything Pat McAfee touches, he turns to gold. Can he do the same thing with this Hollywood attempt? It would be very, very awesome for him personally. I'd be proud of him if he's able to do it because he's one of the hardest working guys out there, and I think he deserves it. But it would also be great to have somebody like that supporting West Virginia, shouting out West Virginia and just giving West Virginia a voice and seeing that logo and that It's just a great marketing. You can't get better marketing than that, right? Imagine if a big movie star was promoting your school. How great would that be? And that's what we could potentially see here if this is a success for McAfee in Hollywood. I'll be anxious to see how good he does in the Tulsa King. I have no doubt he'll probably do pretty darn good. The wrestling part, I'm sure that helped him be you got to do some acting in wrestling because it is scripted. So I'm sure he can kind of, dovetail that a little bit into this Hollywood thing. So it'll be interesting to see how good he does it. Because not every wrestler is a good actor. We have seen that. The late Hulk Hogan did it, wasn't the best actor in the world. Did have some box office success, but his acting skills weren't necessarily great. But nonetheless, I want to talk about that. I thought that was pretty cool. I'll leave a link to the article at WV Sports Chat. I'll also leave a link to the Bloomberg article, who were the first ones to put this story out. The next thing I want to talk about, Voice of Morgantown put out an article. Skylar Callahan has also put an article out about this, but the one I want to react to is the one from Voice of Morgantown. He put out an article about Neal Brown and an interview Neal Brown did with Dave Campbell's Texas Football. I think's the name of the site. And he mentioned his days at West Virginia. And I'll be honest with you, I think Voice of Morgantown was, for some reason, went out of his way to make Neal Brown look bad in this article. Either that or he took it way out of context. I don't know which it is. Out of fairness, I'm going to leave a link to this article. You can go read it. And I'm also going to read it here on the show because I want to react to it as we go through. It says, Neal Brown admits coaching football wasn't his top priority at West Virginia. Right off the bat, the title is misleading. And you'll see why in a minute. It says, when Neal Brown took over the West Virginia Mountaineers football in 2019, he wasn't hired to be okay. He was hired to win. And okay is in quotation marks. In a revealing interview with Dave Campbell's Texas Football, Brown offered an explanation that will only inflame a frustrated fan base. It shouldn't. Not if you take it in proper context. Here's a quote from Brown. It wasn't that we necessarily failed. We were okay. We just never got over the hump. Okay, that's accurate. That's 100% accurate. That's an accurate quote, an accurate statement. Hard to take that out of context. That word, and Voice of Morgantown goes on to say that word alone sums up the problem. And I don't disagree with that. That I don't disagree with, but let's keep going. He says Brown didn't stop there. Another quote. At the start of my tenure, I treated the West Virginia job just like Troy. And what I mean by that is I was really involved in everything. There are two issues with that. One, the job was bigger, so you have more responsibility. Two, my life was evolving and my kids were getting older, and that was my first priority. And so, as a father, I couldn't do all those things. Now, this is the part Voice of Morgantown's running with and saying that it wasn't his first priority. First of all, I think we all kind of got a hint through watching Neal Brown in 6 years that he was a little bit of a micromanaging type coach, okay? And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's it. That was his personality. And he admitted here, yes, he was involved in almost every aspect of the program in his first year because he was able to do that successfully at Troy. And it didn't work at West Virginia. Because in order to do that, it would have taken more time away from his family, which he didn't want to do. And there's nothing wrong with that, which Voice of Morgantown does address that in a minute. But he goes on to say this. This is where he embellishes. He says, read that again. The head coach of a Big 12 program admitted he approached West Virginia like a Sunbelt job. Okay, I'll acknowledge that. He did, but he also admitted that it was the wrong thing to do. Give him some credit for that. And it was year one. His first time at a Power 4 job. How did he know? He didn't know how else to approach it. Okay? He says, and that as his family priorities evolved, he couldn't fully commit to, quote, all those things required at this level. That ain't what he meant. And there's another quote that Skylar Callahan included in his article, which I'll read to you, that tells more of the story. Okay, and I'll read it to you in a minute. But Voice of Morgantown goes on to say, no one faults a man for prioritizing his children. But Power 5 football is not a part-time profession. Neal Brown never said it was, Brad. It is not a developmental internship. It is a 24/7 CEO role in a multi-million-dollar enterprise with 60,000 fans expecting urgency. There's more than 60,000, but I get your point. Expecting urgency, recruiting dominance, NIL innovation, and championships. Neal never said that wasn't the case. Let's go. Let's keep going. He says West Virginia didn't need okay. It needed obsessed. I'm not sure I agree with that. Not sure I agree with that. If you obsess, you're just going to burn yourself out. You might end up divorced with not being able to see your kids. And how good are you going to be then? Keeps going. It says Brown finished his WVU tenure at 37 and 35 overall. That's not progress. That's 500 football. I agree. He never played for a Big 12 championship. He never won 10 games, yada, yada. We all know that. It says recruiting rarely broke into the conference's top tier. Quarterback development stalled repeatedly. One-score games slipped away. Road performances crumbled. I agree with all that. Okay. I'm going to skip through part of this. He's basically just talking about how the seasons were mediocre and Neal Brown's tenure was mediocre. He goes through all the issues. It says, here's how he ended it, okay? For West Virginia, okay was never acceptable. I agree with that. And I think Neal Brown does too. And for 5 years, that ceiling defined the program. The most brutal part, it sounds like he knew it. That is not at all, in my opinion, based on my interpretation, I don't think that's at all what Neal Brown was trying to say. He left out a key quote from the interview that Skylar Callahan talked about in his article. And here's what it says. Neal Brown said this also. He says, it really helped me, talking about his year off. He took a year away from head coaching to be the analyst at Texas. And here's what he learned about it. He says, what he said about that. He says, it really helped me take a breath. Now for this job, talking about North Texas, I'm ready to go. And I have a new perspective. I'm seeing it through the player's eyes. I'm seeing it through the assistant's eyes. And maybe I didn't at the end of my tenure at West Virginia. He's taking accountability here. He's admitting that he did not see everything through everybody's eyes. And I think it harkens back to his tendency to be a micromanager. Not wanting to micromanage everything and delegate some things to your assistant coaches does not mean you weren't committed to winning. It doesn't mean you weren't, quote, obsessed. It doesn't mean you were okay with being mediocre. It means you don't want to micromanage the program. I can't recall. I actually have criticized. I don't know if Brad ever did, but I actually have criticized Neal Brown for being a micromanager too much. And here he kind of admitted that was the case. So in no way, shape, or form do I think it was a bad thing for him to delegate some responsibility, not only for the betterment of the program, but for the betterment of Neal Brown as a man and a father and a husband. And I think I'll be honest with you, it bothers me a little bit that Voice of Morgantown, I'm assuming Brad wrote this, that he is making that out to be a bad thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Joey Bray actually. Joey Bray wrote the article over at Sports Illustrated, not Skylar Callahan. I apologize. I want to make that correction. But I feel like Voice of Morgantown was making Neal Brown out to be a little bit of a villain here because he wanted to delegate some responsibility to other coaches or to other people, and so he could spend more time with his family and still run a Power 4 program. How in the world is that a bad thing? We've heard Curt Cignetti talk about how he doesn't want his coaches at the facilities all day long. And he doesn't want his players. Heck, Coach Roddy even has hour and 45-minute practices. Doesn't mean he's not working and doing things behind the scenes because we know he is. You don't have to obsess about the job and never see your family to be good at it. I think Neal Brown is not a bad guy. Yeah, it didn't work out at West Virginia. I agree. Yes, West Virginia was mediocre under his tenure. I agree with all of that. Yes, it was time to move on from him. I agree with all of that. But stop painting Neal Brown in a bad light and trying to attack him as a person. He's not, and maybe attack's a strong word, but to say Neal Brown didn't care, did he? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you disagree with me, but the way I interpret this is Neal Brown was like, I've got to balance coaching a Power 4 program and being a dad and a husband, which means I can't be a micromanager. That's all I read this as, and nothing more than that. And to me, that does not mean he wasn't making it a top priority. I just man, let's just move on and let Neal Brown, and here I am talking about it, right? But let's just let Neal Brown do his thing at North Texas. I'm cheering for Neal Brown to do well at North Texas. I really am. I think Neal Brown deserves to be successful at North Texas. I think he's a good human. For all intents, he seems to me like a good human being, a good husband, a good father. Why not wish him success? It's fair to criticize his tenure as far as how he coached it, in my opinion. But to say he didn't make it a top priority is just flat out inaccurate, in my opinion. Was it his number one priority? Maybe not, but it shouldn't be. You know what should be your top priority? If you're a man of faith, it should be God, which I think, he is. Your family should come in there, and then being the head coach of West Virginia. It should not be your top priority if you've got your priorities in the right place. And as fans, we shouldn't expect it. We should expect them to take care of their families and also be a good coach. It can be done. And I think that's what Neal Brown was trying to do. Maybe that year away will help him figure all that out. But at the end of the day, man, just stop taking opportunities to make Neal Brown look bad, because I just don't think it's a good look. I think it's a little bit of sour grapes, and we need to move on. He's been gone a year now, over a year. Rich Rodriguez is our coach now. The Neal Brown era is over. Okay? It's over. Let him move on. Let's quit bad-mouthing him. It's okay to report on things and talk about him. I have no issue with that, but let's stop trying to make him look bad. Now, if something comes out that does make him look bad, that's one thing. But we shouldn't be trying to spin things to try to purposely make him look bad. To me, that's a whole different conversation, and to me, that's what this article was. It was taking stuff out of context to make him look like he wasn't trying to win. Again, maybe you agree with Brad, and if you do, that's fine. Let me know in the comment section. Let me know if you agree with me in the comment section. Also, let me know what you think about Pat McAfee and his attempt to go to Hollywood. There are, down below this video, if you scroll over, you will see, go to the comment section and scroll over, you will see there are some quizzes that you can take regarding this video. Please take those quizzes. It's another way to interact with the show and help the algorithm. You can also hit the thumbs up button below. That really helps. Sharing it with your family and friends helps. The comments help, and of course, subscribing to the channel. I want to give a shout out to my paid VIP members of this episode: Kenny Evans, Morris Davis, Al Walker, Hellbilly, and Dr. P4 or DRP4. Thank you all for your paid support. If you want to be a paid member, get access to special members-only content, early access to special videos, first priority in chats, those types of things. There are two different levels. The perks are explained once you hit join. There's a join button below, or you can click the link in the description box and join that way as well, or over at my channel homepage. I really appreciate you tuning into this episode. Hope the rest of your day is top shelf. God bless you. And cue Country Roads.